I'm Mary McQueen, and this is Footprints of Hope. Today our story is entitled, We Need More Josiahs. In the long history of Israel in the Old Testament, there is quite a period when Israel did not have an earthly king. God sent his leaders like Moses and Abraham and Joshua, but did not appoint a king. For a while, God anointed and appointed judges to help the people understand what his law meant. Some of them were better than others, but the people became desirous of an earthly king. God warned them that, being human, kings would bring a lot of bad things as well as good. But finally, God had the prophets anoint a king. From the beginning, it was clear that having a king did not help their status with their enemies. Sometimes the kings were good leaders, but even the best of them fell prey to the sins of pride and greed and lust and adultery for their own selfish purposes. The Bible says that each king was worse than the last. Finally, a king named Manasseh came along, and he did things, the Bible says, that were so bad that it made those little hairs in your ears tingle when you heard of them. King Josiah was crowned at the ripe old age of 8 years old, but from the beginning he proved to be a righteous leader. Over the years, with the bad kings, the temple in which God's people were to worship him had fallen into disrepair. Josiah began to rebuild it, and one day, while clearing up the altar, one of his men found a copy of God's law that had been tossed aside. The man read it, then brought it to Josiah and read it to him. Josiah was saddened to realize that God's people had gotten far away from the ways God wanted them to live. He wore mourning clothes and asked his people to do the same. He required his people to go to worship and praise services to God, and soon everyone was getting excited about the grace that God was bestowing on his people. Josiah reinstituted the celebration of the Passover feast and enlivened the faith that people had. A prophetess came to Josiah in his 18th year of reign and told him that God was well pleased with him, and that because he had been sad that his people had forgotten the teachings of God and was teaching them, God would bless all the rest of the days of Josiah's life. And so, all the rest of Josiah's life was spent in rich, righteous living, worshiping and praising God, and there were no wars against them. God stayed the hand of all of his enemies. And so the acts of one righteous man brought peace and prosperity to God's people by his way of living. There have been New Testament Josiahs down through the centuries of the Christian church. They were people who, when people had forgotten what the church was supposed to be about, primarily a place to worship God and share the gospel of Jesus Christ with others, reminded them and tried to get them back on track. You know the names of the Josiahs I am talking about. A man named Martin Luther, who spurred the Protestant Revolution in the church by questioning the ways of the current church. A man named John Wesley, who required people to study the Bible before coming to worship because the people of England no longer knew their scriptures, and teaching was fruitless until they did. A man named Billy Graham, who spread the single message of the gospel of Jesus Christ all over the world and enlivened the church as a whole. A man named Martin Luther King Jr., who reminded people that God's promises in the Constitution of the United States included all persons, just like in the Bible, no matter the color of their skin. A nun in India who reminded us that Christian service starts with worshiping God each day and looking for the face of Christ in all you meet, and then ministering to them. Notice that each of these wonderful gifts from God, each Josiah, often had to stand against evil in the world around them. Think about something else. Note the similarity between the name Jesus and Josiah. Josiah's name means the same thing as Jesus, the Anointed One. Both came to make the world a better place, a more caring place. We need Josiahs, good, righteous leaders who focus on others first, as God called us to do in all our communities. Could you become the Josiah they need? Pray about it. Your unique God-given gifts can make a difference. Amen.
This has been a 2021 Footprints of Hope podcast, inspiring stories of faith by Pastor Mary McQueen. Visit her at Pastor Mary Mac on Twitter. Visit the blog at pastormcqueen.com. Original score and post-production provided by Ken McQueen. Visit him at threescorefilm.com.